Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today for Human Resource Executives Ask HRE Live Q&A. I'm Kathryn Mayer, the Benefits Editor at HRE, and I will be the moderator during this event in which we'll be discussing a topic I know is on everyone's mind, which is, of course, COVID-19 vaccines and employer mandates. Vaccine mandates are one of my favorite topics recently. I've been writing all about them, so I'm really looking forward to today's panel. I'm joined by some terrific industry thought leaders that know this topic inside and out, and we're going to break down the key features of the vaccine and testing mandate, providing actionable insights to help employers stay up to date. So I know this is going to be really valuable. We have Ellen McCann, who is Assistant Vice President, Unum Solutions and Employment Law Expert. Tamika Newson, Assistant Vice President, Legal Counsel, Unum's Employment Law Group, and Preetha Sakaran, who is the Head of Digital Strategy and Digital Incubator at Unum. Thank you all so much for being here today. And a note to everyone listening in, you can ask questions for our speakers today in the comment section. So take advantage of that opportunity and we'll get to your questions as time allows. So without further ado, let's get started. So Ellen, as someone with decades of experience in the regulatory landscape, why don't you kick things off and explain what the private employer mandate is and how it will be implemented?
Right. Thank you, Kathryn. And to everyone listening, apologies for my voice. I have what most of us haven't had for 2 years now, and that is a cold. So we've all been locked up at home and masked up. So here we go. Anyway, so again, thank you for having us. So the private employer mandate applies to employers with 100 or more employees and requires those employers to mandate that their employees either show proof of vaccination or provide proof at least weekly of a negative COVID-19 test. We don't know exactly all of the ins and outs of how it will be implemented yet, because as you know, the president did announce the plan, but he left it for OSHA to give us guidelines on the exact specifics of how it will be implemented. So we are anxiously awaiting those guidelines, and we'll know more about how it will be implemented. But we do know the bones of it, or the meat of it, which as I described is either vaccination or testing, subject to, of course, permissible medical and religious exemptions for employees that can prove that they warrant those exemptions.
Great. And I know, we're anxiously awaiting the exact guidance. We were just chatting before we all hopped on live. Fingers were crossed that we were going to get that guidance. But so everyone is certainly eager for those to drop. Can you also tell me, Ellen, though, a little bit more about like what categories of workers are covered, from what we understand so far? And what might be the difference in the requirements for healthcare workers and federal employees and federal contractors? We know there's some guidance surrounding the federal workers. So,
right. So really, the current mandate has 3 components to it. It covers the employers with 100 or more employees that we talked about, which most folks refer to as the private mandate. That's the mandate we're waiting for OSHA to give us guidance on. But federal employees already had a mandate prior to the most recent presidential plan being announced, and that is that they have to show proof of vaccination, subject to medical or religious exemptions. The same is true for healthcare workers and federal contractors. So for those 3 subsets of employees, they have to show proof of vaccination. There isn't an automatic right for those employees to opt out of vaccination through testing, although we do believe that testing may be a reasonable accommodation for those employees for those covered, legally required religious and medical exemptions. But those, again, are a little bit more strict, if you will, than what we at least assume OSHA will tell us for the private employers, which most employees will have a choice of either testing or vaccination.
Great, thanks, Ellen. Tamika, any insights to add to that? And then can you also give us some insight into the exemptions, which Ellen, of course, mentioned, what exemptions can be requested? And then what about the accommodations employers are required to provide for those who are not vaccinated?
Absolutely. The key to this for everyone to understand is that, COVID-19 inherently has been deemed a danger to the workplace. So, for that reason, the government isn't entitled to implement these mandates, and our private employers have been implementing these mandates. I wanted to say that because I think it's helpful for people to understand how we got here. And then we can also understand why there are exemptions in place, because under the ADA, if someone does have a disability that prevents them from getting vaccinated, then employers have a duty to provide an accommodation for them in the workplace. And so when we're talking about what these exemptions might look like and what accommodations might look like, we first have to look to see, is this someone who is required to be exempt from this? Is this someone who has a qualified disability that prevents them from getting vaccinated? And then the second piece of that is this a person that has a religious affiliation that precludes them from being vaccinated? There are two bases under the law that require employers to provide these accommodations, and one's under the ADA, the other is under Title VII. So we have an interplay of the law here that the employers have to get really comfortable with and say, okay, if this person cannot medically be vaccinated in the workplace, what can we do to keep them and the rest of the workplace safe and allow them to work? And a lot of these accommodations are being considered working from home, which a lot of us have done for a long period of time already, or the things that we did initially in the workplace, social distancing, masking, if there are different places you can put people who are unvaccinated. But whatever it is, and the CDC has great guidelines that I think a lot of employers are looking to for all of these to say, okay, what kind of accommodations can we provide to keep everyone safe? But I think the key for everyone to remember is that the way this mandate is laid out, the expectation is that most people are going to be vaccinated and or under the private employer mandate tested. But if they have some sort of medical or religious reason why they can't do that, then that's the only time we're going to be looking to exemptions and accommodations.
Got it. Thanks. And going a little further in that, you brought up some of this already, but any standards as far as what standards should employees follow or employers follow in evaluating medical exemption requests? And, what about non-medical and religious exemption requests? Anything else to add there?
Absolutely. So under the medical exemption request, we're going to be looking at the ADA and what the CDC has given us guidance about what they believe would be conditions that would qualify for an employee to not get vaccinated. The employee's own medical providers will give us information that will help us to evaluate whether this is a person that would be at risk if they were to be vaccinated. So we have to look at all of those things in their totality. And the EEOC itself has issued just yesterday, we keep getting these new guidelines and updated guidances. Just yesterday, they issued new guidance about how we should go about looking at these exemption requests, what we should challenge, what kind of questions we can ask, and especially for the religious exemption requests, because these are somewhat new. They had guidelines for the medical ones. Now they're issuing guidelines for the religious exemption requests, giving employers some good information about how to move through that. You can question whether someone has a bona fide religious belief and ask them what other things they're doing in line with that belief that might, indicate that they would not be willing to get vaccinated because of it. It's a fine line that employers have to walk, but you can ask these questions, you can get valid information and make objective decisions based on the requests that these employees are giving you. But it's going to be work. It's going to be work for the employers on the medical side and the religious side, and there's going to be lots of litigation.
Yes, absolutely. It's something definitely to watch. And I can't imagine the complications that are involved and how much work that will take for employers in navigating those accommodations. So that will be definitely interesting how that continues to to play out. Preetha, let's bring you into the conversation, and I want to hear about technology. And you have, given your experience or expertise in the HR digital solution space, I want to talk about this role of technology in the vaccine mandates. How does tech play into this equation, first of all? And then any kind of technology challenges, what challenges will employers face as they consider the tools that can help them respond to these vaccine mandates? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Definitely, Kathryn. And I would say at its core, as you're thinking about rolling this out to all your employees, what you need is probably a solution that is fairly self-serve, that helps employees, report and log, where they are in from a vaccination, exemption, and so on. So you need a tool that, that can easily help employees and HR admin all kind of get on the same page in terms of where they are in the process. But as you think about, you've probably already heard from Ellen and Tamika that the guidelines are still evolving. And so when you think about a technical solution, look for flexibility, because I think that is, things are evolving, and you may want to kind of change, the process that you want to kind of deploy with your employees. So that's going to be critical. As you're thinking about investment into this, the shelf life of this is going to be limited. Right, so we're kind of hoping, fingers crossed, that this is probably for the next 1 or 2 years. And so, how do you make investments for a solution that has a limited shelf life? That's going to be critical in your consideration. And then finally, I would say verifying the vaccination status. Right, so as there is no centralized registry for having this information that you can verify against, and so the authenticity of the vaccination records and how do you really solve for that is going to be a critical challenge that I think we would face.
Absolutely, thank you so much, Ellen. Back to you, talking about some testing requirements, which seem to be, a big piece of this for the employees who are going to be exempted from the vaccine requirement. What testing requirements would they need to meet?
So, Kathryn, it's a great question, and unfortunately, it's one of those open questions right now that we're waiting OSHA to give us more guidance on. We know from the president's plan that they'll have to test at least weekly, or they'll have to provide results, negative test results at least weekly. We don't know a heck of a lot more than that. What does at least weekly mean? Is it just once a work week? Is it more often than not? More often than that. We also don't know exactly what types of tests will be acceptable. Will rapid tests be acceptable, for instance? We don't know who will pay for the tests. So I hate to give you a lot of we don't knows, but unfortunately in this space we don't know. What we do know is it will be a pretty significant burden for both the employer and the employee, because at least weekly testing is going to be a pretty significant undertaking for both parties that are involved here. And so we're anxiously awaiting exactly what that looks like. And one thing I'm at least waiting to see is, will OSHA tell us that employers have to allow all their employees to test in lieu of vaccination? Or will private employers be able to say, at our company, everyone gets vaccinated unless you have a medical or religious exemption, and then we'll consider testing? So for me, I think that's the most important piece of this that OSHA has to clarify for us, because if all employers have to allow testing to everyone, even if they don't need it for religious or medical reasons, that's going to be a much greater percentage of the population that will be going through testing. And that will be, I think, much more impactful for many employers, particularly smaller employers.
Absolutely. Those are really good points. Going further into that a little bit, obviously there's so much complexity around those testing requirements. And like you said, of course, we're still waiting for more guidance on that. But how are employers expected, at this point at least, expected to track and verify employee test results? Because, testing by itself is already super complicated. Then we're talking about tracking all this, verifying this. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. And so we think, given what the federal contractor guidelines are, we think OSHA will follow a similar path. And that is that self-attestation of either testing or vaccination status will probably not be significant or not be satisfactory. So the employer will have to actually look at the test results, or in the vaccination world, the vaccine card or some other proof. So the employer is going to have to get that testing result, and not only that, but make sure their employees are continuing to test on a regular schedule. So this is where I think Preeta's comments about having that tech solution, this is really something employers want to think about, because you can't have a spreadsheet where you have, however many employees you have, which ones need to be tested, what days do they need to be tested, do I have the results in, what do they look like, where am I storing them, are they secure, how long do I have to keep them for? So this is really where technology can help, because if you have a self-serve solution where your employee can go in and they can say, I was tested, negative result, they can upload a picture of the result, HR can just go in and take a peek at that picture, make sure it's valid, and also if the tech solution can proactively reach out to the employee, reminding them of when they need to test, and reminding them they need to upload their test results, that would take a significant amount of work off of the plate of the HR person who's responsible for this.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of really good points there. Tamika, I'm curious your thoughts too on this. Ellen had just mentioned the attestation of vaccine status. Do you think that is adequate enough for verification? What are your thoughts on that?
No, Ellen got that exactly right. I think for any federal mandate, there's so much that we don't know, but what we do know about federal mandates is there's probably going to be some requirement for reporting at some point in time. There's probably going to be some sort of penalty for failure to comply as well. And if we don't have valid proof that we've gone through the process of actually seeing and documenting and logging the vaccination status as well as the testing status, I think employers are going to get themselves into trouble real quick.
Absolutely. I certainly agree with that. Get yourself in trouble. Something employers certainly want to avoid. And Preeta, a lot of this talk about the technology, about solutions. Can you walk me through a little bit about, I'm an employer who is trying to evaluate potential solutions for addressing these vaccine mandate requirements. Of course, we're talking about how important those are. What should employers consider when they are evaluating that?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, at the core, there's some basic capabilities you're looking for, right? You need to kind of have the workflow and the process flow for managing and tracking vaccination status, exemption, testing compliance, and so on. So you need that at the core. But where it starts to get tricky, and which is what you should look for when you're looking for a solution, is does the solution have the right flexibility? So not all your employees may follow the same path. Your contractors, remote workers, you may want to kind of have a different flow. And so, any solution that you're looking at, you need the ability to kind of, siphon off different employee groups or different, set of individuals to follow different paths and different process flows. So that's going to be critical. I think Tamika just mentioned, how do you ensure that compliance, right? So what can a digital solution offer in terms of an email or, a reminder nudge to employees to upload their documentation, or, to check whether they have taken the next shot, the booster shot or not. So a lot of that is going to be some of the key capabilities that you will need, apart from just for the HR admin, an ability to slice and dice information and see where employees are as a whole, as well as within different groups in terms of compliance. In addition to those things, I would say the experience has to be fairly intuitive as well. I mean, this can get confusing for employees if you don't provide the right guidance. So while as much, I would love to believe that technology can solve all the problems, I think this is one where technology, blended with the right guidance that you provide to both employees and HR admin is going to be critical. So as you look at solution providers, definitely look for, a provider that kind of brings that mix of being in the space, understanding, what guidance will you need to kind of offer, and so on.
Absolutely. I love the mix of both the technology and, of course, the guidance. That's important. In most conversations we have about benefits in HR and the employer space, but certainly with this, when there's just so much to navigate. And speaking of solutions, I want to give you a second. I want to ask about Unum's new solutions, and how do you plan to help customers navigate this? And I know there is a new solution, so can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so Unum is launching a Unum vaccine verifier. It's a digital solution that Unum is offering to employers of all sizes, and totally backed. There's a digital component of it, like I said, but it is also backed by the years of experience we have around managing ADA and managing exemptions and so on for our employees. And Ellen, I don't know if you want to kind of add anything to that.
Yeah, no, Preet, I think you teed it up so nicely before when you said you need the mix of technology and the personal touch, and that's really what we've tried to accomplish here. So we've used our experience in helping our customers with ADA accommodations in the past, our experience with handling sensitive medical documentation in a safe and secure way, as well as our experience in Preet's team. Really, they're just innovators in the space of HR tech solutions, and we've built what we think is a very holistic solution for HR, where we're not just allowing them to track vaccination status. Of course, that's part of it, and there's a vaccination verification module, but there's also an exemption guided support module where employees can ask for an exemption. We ask them a set of scripted questions, and then in addition to that, we provide HR with some guided decision-making points to help them evaluate the information and know really whether they should be approving or denying those exemption requests. And then, of course, we have a testing module, because we do know, as we've all talked about today, there will be some employees that will be testing. And so that testing module is built so the employee can go in self-serve, upload their documentation, get instant reminders right from the tool. So we're really hopeful that this is really going to help ease the burden for HR, but also help employees have a better experience here, because we know that this is going to be burdensome for both employers and employees. And we tried to come up with a solution that makes it the best employee solution it can be, while still helping employers manage their compliance obligations.
Yeah, I want to add a little bit too. One of the things that the new EEOC guidance added for us yesterday is that employers have to provide some sort of individual or some sort of location where employees can report their need for an exemption request. And having a tool like this would make it very, very simple for employers and employees to say that they've complied with that expectation, that everyone understands where they're supposed to go, what they're supposed to do, and there's no confusion about how to go through that process.
Sounds terrific. Certainly something that is very needed at this point in time. And Preeta, you had mentioned just in passing when you were talking about the solution, you had mentioned booster shots, and it just kind of got me thinking about there's so much new guidance from health officials on these third doses or second doses, as far as Johnson & Johnson or immunocompromised or people with health risks. Is that something also that employers need to be paying attention to as far as those vaccine mandates and making sure if those, if guidance changes as far as who is really fully vaccinated? Is that something else that employers really need to pay attention to?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree, and which is why I kind of I reiterate flexibility is going to be key in this, because it does look like it as far as guidelines are concerned, it's a little bit of a moving target, and and just keeping up with these guideline changes and making sure you're accommodating that in the tool is going to be critical.
Absolutely. Certainly a moving target. Flexibility, I think, like you just said, obviously just so key to navigating this pandemic. And then, of course, navigating this phase of the pandemic, certainly. So I think we have time for some more questions. Ellen, can we expect more regulation and or changes to existing regulations in this space?
I think, Kathryn, for those of us who've been living in the COVID world from a compliance and HR perspective, we know that the only thing we can count on is things are going to change, right? I mean, for those of us who have the CDC website memorized and, as soon as you learn it, the next day it changes, I think we can continue to expect that. So I expect additional regulations. I expect that when we do have OSHA guidance, we'll get some challenges, as Tamika mentioned, but we'll also see some states and municipalities probably passing some of their own mandates. We know we already have some of those in existence, but we can expect to have more there. And then I think as the science evolves, we know the regulation has to keep up with science. And so, CDC has done a great job trying to keep up, but we've never dealt with anything like this before. And so we've seen CDC guidance change very quickly over the last few years. So that's the one thing I think we can count on. So to Preeta's point, we all have to be nimble. We all have to be flexible. And whatever solutions we bring to the table have to have that same sense of ability to be nimble, because we're all going to be on our toes for at least, I think, the next year or so, and have to just continue to be able to just pivot and flex.
You're on mute, Kathryn.
Sorry, guys. Ellen, you brought up some state regulations, which are important. Tamika, anything to add about those state level regulations evolving in light of the federal mandate?
Oh yeah, we're going to see some War of the Roses kind of stuff. We've already seen it in Texas. The federal mandate came out. Texas immediately issued its own state mandate saying you can't mandate vaccinations. So we'll see some litigation battles between the state and the federal authority. And I presume that when we get the final OSHA regulations we've all been waiting for, there'll be some preemption language in there that says that the federal mandate is the mandate and we all have to follow it. If they're drafting it, like I think they probably will. But in terms of state level regulations, typically the states are able to do more than what the federal regulations require. So there may be some states that want to take the mandate a little bit further than what the federal regulations have done. I think, like I said, we'll see some that are going to still try to prevent the mandate itself. Don't know how successful that's going to be, but I think we're going to just see a lot of litigation in light of the regulations, because people want to make this a social political thing, and it's a health thing, and we're trying to figure out how to keep everyone safe. And as long as we keep that in mind, hopefully people will start making some health related decisions.
Absolutely. I know we have just a couple of minutes, so to wrap things up, I thought it might be interesting to hear each of your opinions on, as we're waiting for guidance, more guidance, I should say. I know there's already tons, but just as employers are trying to navigate all this, do you have, what's one piece of advice that you would give folks listening? Tamika, why don't we start with you? Final words of wisdom here.
Sure. Just be prepared. We see what's going on. We see what the landscape looks like. Don't wait for what the final regulations are going to be. We know we're going to have to do something. So I say, everybody, get your HR staff, your legal staff, get everybody prepared for what's coming next.
Great. Ellen, do you want to?
Yes, I would say stay informed too. So, keep your alerts on. Make sure you're checking your blogs and your websites, because you need to know as soon as something passes, you're going to want to take advantage of what Tamika just said. And, you're ready to go, put it in place as soon as we hear something more definitive.
Great.
Yeah, I would just emphasize the same thing. Start now. I think you can stagger things, right? So maybe you start off with collecting vaccination status, and then decide on some of the other stuff that you need to do. So start now is what I would say.
Absolutely. Start now. Certainly, I'm sure the folks listening have begun already and are just continuing to navigate this. So, with that being said, I think that's a great place to wrap up. And thank you so much to the three of you for joining us, Unum for putting this on, and for everyone listening today. I'm sure you got a lot out of this panel, and we could talk forever to you guys. But with that being said, we'll end it here. So thank you so much for joining, everyone, and we will see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Kathryn.
Kathryn.